U.S. Justice confirms the arrival of diplomat Alex Saab to the country. The statement supports a kidnapping of the Venezuelan official. Peru and Venezuela reestablished their diplomatic relations after the breaking of ties in 2017. The activity of the Cumbre Vieja volcano caused a cloud of ashes to rise, resulting in a partial suspension of the airborne operations in the Canary island of La Palma. Hello, welcome to Front de South. I am Rey Gomez from the Telesur studios in Havana. We begin with the news. The spokeswoman for the United States Department of Justice, Nicole Neves-Oxman, confirmed the extradition of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab, marking once again how Washington institutionalized a violation of international law and all the conventions that regulate diplomatic activity in the world. The diplomat landed Saturday night in the flight of the Department of Justice of the United States and was immediately transferred to a high-security federal prison located in Miami. The Justice Department official explained that the next Monday, Alex Saab will appear before Judge John Sullivan in a court of the Southern District of the state of Florida. Cape Verde's authorities had no control to guarantee the safety of Saab, as they don't have a bilateral extradition treaty with the United States. This extradition constitutes an international crime. The Venezuelan diplomat was extracted illegally, and before that, he was subjected to torture and cruel treatment, certified even by experts from the United Nations. The defense of diplomat Alex Saab issued a statement on Sunday in which it rejects his extraction and transfer to U.S. territory, an act described as a kidnapping and violation of international treaties that creates a dangerous precedent of a worldwide scope. In the communique issued from Praia, the lawyers denounced, quote, "This action was carried out without prior notification to any member of the defense team, who also did not have the relevant documentation or resolution. We transfer of Alex Saab to the United States on a date prior to the final and inappealable decision granted extradition without the case having been transferred to the court of first instance for the decision of the pending issues constitutes a flagrant illegality and contempt for the rules of international law." Quote. Cape Verde's authorities had abducted Alex Saab, acting under orders from the United States entities after Saab was detained irregularly in the African nation since 2020. Venezuelan officials denounced the process, claiming it violates the Vienna Convention, while they demanded the immediate release of the diplomat. Saab, who acted as permanent representative attaché in the African Union, also took part in the peace talks the Venezuelan government and opposition held in Mexico. The envoy was detained arbitrarily past June 19, 2020, in the island nation under U.S. justice orders for alleged charge of money laundering without being shown evidence that proved him guilty. The Venezuelan diplomat was held captive out of the lawful abidance of 491 days without an arrest warrant or due process. On Saturday, the head of the Bolivarian government in the talks with the opposition, Jorge Rodriguez, informed the withdrawal of his delegation from the negotiations in Mexico as a response to the abduction of the diplomat Alex Saab.
Our delegation announces that it is suspending its participation at the negotiation and dialogue table tomorrow, October 17th in Mexico City, as an expression of our deepest protest against the brutal aggression against the person and the investiture of our delegate Alex Saab Moran.
Jorge Rodriguez announced the illegal abduction of Venezuelan diplomat Alex Saab carried out by the government of the United States.
The delegation of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to the table of dialogue and negotiation repudiates the illegal operation of an extraction carried out by the government of the United States today in the person of the Venezuelan citizen Alex Saab Moran, a representative in the referred process and Venezuela's diplomatic representative to the African Union.
Jorge Rodriguez made the governments of Colombia and the United States, as well as the extremist sector of the Venezuelan opposition, responsible for the kidnapping of Alex Saab.
We hold the belligerent narco government of Ivan Duque accountable for this crime, as well as the government of the United States of America and the most violent sectors of the far right wing in Venezuela, including Leopoldo López, Juan Guaidó, Carlos Vecchio, Carlos Paparoni, who persist in their provocative and aggressive actions that harm and attempt against the progress of the table talks in Mexico City.
In other news, Peru and Venezuela reestablished their diplomatic relations after the breaking of ties in 2017 under the Pedro Pablo Kuczynski administration. In a statement, the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Venezuela informed on the representatives' exchange. Alexander Yañez was appointed as ambassador of Venezuela to the Republic of Peru, whereas Richard Freddy Rojas Garcia is the Peruvian envoy to Caracas. The renewal of diplomatic ties comes after the taking of office of Pedro Castillo as a head of state after almost 4 years of irregular communications and hostile policies applied by former Peruvian governments toward Venezuela. 10 international airports in Cuba are ready for the country's reopening of borders in November, after a month of resuming touristic activities overseen by heavy health security regulations. Civil aviation authorities confirmed having received requests from companies all over the world, expressing their interest of making routine flight operations to Cuba, for which they have speeded up many of the documentation and credit processes regarding the matter, foreseeing the increase of air traffic. According to Cuban airport executive managers, there are many requests from airlines with offices in the island, as well as others who had suspended their activities due to the pandemic and now have asked to reestablish regular travel plans. In the meantime, over 3,400 social works in Cuba have been developed, only a few weeks after the initiative was launched, directly assessed by the national government. This program has given way to 450 new building projects and over 3,000 social works in the housing, infrastructure, and healthcare sectors, as well as benefiting culture, sports, commerce, and hydraulic institutions, all of it in only a few weeks. The initiative spreads through 62 neighborhoods only in Havana and began 2 months ago with the participation of several ministries and local administrations that responds to the needs of the residents through a constant and constructive dialogue that emphasizes on the citizenship's voice.
We lived many things these weeks in the neighborhoods we've assisted. Places that never had sidewalks or streets in good conditions, that always faced problems with water access and ditches, and residues that could cause health problems. So what is going on now is that with joint efforts from the communities and government authorities, we are providing services that these communities never had. And we see the joy in people and the trust we're developing, and most importantly, hope. And that, I think, is more than positive in a moment such as this, when we've lived 2 intense years facing aggressions and overall struggling against a pandemic. But nothing can stop us. We have to make this a line of work that stays in a systematic, natural, and genuine way, where everyone can contribute with something, where everyone has their say. I think this is all still not enough. We need to do more, because many things still need to be solved. But a path has been set, and people are supporting it. It's a way of building that democracy we aim for, of consolidating participation. This is a way of being consequent with what our Constitution states.
The Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology Center in Cuba will begin the phase 2 of the clinical trial with the anti-COVID-19 candidate Mambisa and the Abdala vaccine as a reinforcement tool for people recovering from the disease. People interested in participating in the test must be between 19 and 80 years old and have not received any vaccine. Mambisa will be applied by a nasal spray or dispenser unique of its kind. It will be combined with Abdala, the first Cuban and Latin American vaccine against coronavirus infection, which has a reported 100% effectiveness against severe disease and death. In this clinical trial, the developers of the drug described the ability to induce an immune action, especially in the nasopharyngeal mucus. We'll be right back after this very short break. Welcome back. Thousands of migrants, mostly Haitians, continue crowding the temporary base of the Mexican Commission for Refugee Aid in Tapachula's Olympic Stadium in search of refuge. In an attempt to streamline procedures and stamp the flow of migrants to the United States, the Mexican Commission for Refugee Aid opened a center for asylum seekers on Mexico's southern border a month ago. Previously, huge crowds had packed the streets around the Commission's downtown offices in Tapachula. Some migrants say they will continue to try to get to the United States, and if they get deported, they will return to Mexico to find work there.
I will return to Mexico and look for a stable job, establish myself here in Mexico and work here in Mexico. Here in Tapachula I have not been able to find work, but up north I know there is work because I was working in Hermosillo, Sonora back in 2018. Staying here in Tapachula is not very good for me because I need money, and I have to spend here, and when I'm eating, I am eating thinking about what my daughter might be eating.
The Brazilian far-right is trying to erase the memory of Brazil's most important academic, Paulo Freire. But around the country, social movements are working to make sure this doesn't happen. In Diadema, our correspondent Brian Meyer reports.
Paulo Freire died in 1997, but Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro still thinks his ideas are so dangerous, he's trying to purge them from the school system. In Diadema, a feminist social movement performed a theater piece to remember his work in this industrial city on the outskirts of São Paulo.
Diadema was Brazil's first progressive Workers' Party city government, and Paulo Freire came here with all of his ideas, and it was a happy encounter, because the city of Diadema was built by social movements.
Women in Motion is a social movement that started in Diadema 30 years ago using Paulo Freire's pedagogy of the oppressed methodology to mix gymnastics and dance with feminist political formation. Today it has over 2,000 members.
We have many participants who are victims of domestic violence. They often arrive here feeling sad and alone. So, through different activities like dance, speeches, group conversations, they feel like they are no longer alone, that they have their rights and they feel more capable of changing their lives.
In an example of events happening all over Brazil, this week the women of Diadema showed why the Brazilian right's attempt to erase the memory of Paulo Freire is doomed to failure. Brian Meir, Telesur, Diadema.
On Saturday, the activity of the Cumbre Vieja volcano caused a cloud of ashes to rise, resulting in a partial suspension of the urban operations in the Canary island of La Palma. The volcanic ash reaches up to 4.5 kilometers of altitude and has forced the whole direction of air traffic twice. The outburst in the island, home to 85,000 people, is the first in 50 years and one of the longest in duration ever recorded. Although no human lives have been lost, it has brought significant damage to infrastructure and marine life. 7,000 people were evacuated, some of them lost all their belongings to the extinction of the lava spew by the volcano. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has warned that the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed the agency further from achieving the goal of ending world hunger by 2030. FAO Director General Ku Dong-kyu said the UN agency must double its efforts to find ways to help the world produce enough food, while climate change and conflict made the task even harder. On Saturday, the 40th World Food Day was commemorated. The annual event intended to raise awareness about the 3 billion people in the world who cannot afford a healthy diet.
This year's World Food Day found us at a critical moment. The COVID-19 pandemic remains a global challenge causing untold losses and hardship. The impacts of the climate crisis are all around us. The lives and the livelihoods of millions of people have been thrown into turmoil, with a widespread suffering due to the many natural disasters and humanitarian emergencies. Global food insecurity has not been this severe for years.
During the height of the COVID crisis, when borders were closed, it was the local producers who ensure that their communities and their neighborhoods had sufficient supply of food. As we follow up on the Food Systems Summit, we need a broad-based partnership that ensure that small-scale farmers are fairly rewarded for their labor. Major priorities are pricing systems that reflect the full and the true cost of production, and also by deploying more finance to neglected and vulnerable rural communities.
We have more stories coming up, and now we take a financial break. Welcome back. Now we present a summary of this week's main stories. For Telesur English, I am Rick Gomez. Thank you for watching.
In Latin America, as reported by UNICEF, nearly 19,000 migrant children have crossed the Darien Gap so far this year, a crossing point between Panama and Colombia, where they are exposed to sexual abuse, violence and hunger as they cross borders with their parents.
Also in Colombia, a 12-year-old boy and an 18-year-old young man of Venezuelan origin were killed by illegal armed groups in the department of Norte de Santander after they were seized by the community for their claimed involvement in a robbery. This extrajudicial killing was condemned by several Colombian people and the Venezuelan government, which will raise the matter to United Nations' highest instances to find justice for the boys. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro Moros accused the Colombian government of promoting a xenophobic and hatred campaign against Venezuelan citizens, leading to violent attacks against them.
In other topics, G20 leaders met to discuss children's safety in Afghanistan as about 15 million minors are at big risk of illiteracy, famine and health issues as they are more vulnerable under the Taliban ruling of the Asian nation. Also this week, a recent study by the Center for Democracy and Technology revealed that United States schools handed electronic devices to children to spy on them using surveillance AI under the pretext of protecting them.
Now we move on to other stories of this week. Last Tuesday, October 12th, marked another anniversary of the arrival of Christopher Columbus to the Americas. In Bolivia, several indigenous communities seized the date to pay homage to the Huipala, the multicolored flag that represents a plurinational state of the Andean nation. Bolivians also used the occasion to protest against right-wing destabilization attempts and discrimination. On a positive note, Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro sent a letter to the King of Spain Felipe VI, urging him to acknowledge the indigenous genocide that resulted from America's conquest.
Authorities in Mexico City presented a new pre-Hispanic sculpture of a woman that will replace that of colonialist Christopher Columbus, meant to represent 5 centuries of indigenous resistance. Despite these efforts, the struggle of other indigenous communities does not cease. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera announced the deployment of troops to 2 southern regions, where security forces have been repressing indigenous Mapuche communities demanding land rights.
We conclude this summary referring to the main political news that moved the international community this week.
The Non-Aligned Movement celebrated a commemorative summit for its 60th anniversary. 114 delegations from various countries and 40 ministers of foreign affairs participated in the summit and also advocated for a multipolar world and non-interference in internal affairs.
The United Nations Top Court awarded Somalia control of most of a potentially oil and gas-rich chunk of the Indian Ocean on Tuesday, after a bitter legal battle with neighboring Kenya over their sea border, although Kenya kept a part of the 100,000 square kilometer area.
Lebanese authorities have arrested 8 suspects linked to an attack on Thursday featuring sniper fire against peaceful demonstrators in Beirut, which left at least 6 dead and about 60 injured. The Lebanese resistance movement, Hezbollah, and the Amal movement denounced the attacks.
Venezuelan Minister for Public Works and Services Nestor Reverol provided details of the recent sabotage against the country's power grid, which momentarily affected over 30% of Caracas. The attack comes as Venezuela gears up for regional elections in November.
A large explosion tore through a Shia mosque in the southern Afghan city of Kandahar during Friday prayers, causing heavy casualties. Preliminary reports point to a suicide bomber who entered to the mosque a week after a similar attack on Shiite worshippers at a mosque in the northern city of Kunduz claimed by the Islamic State group.
These were the main stories and topics of the week. For more information, stay tuned to Telstar English.